We've got Shaun with us now. He's a senior political writer for BearingDrift.com. Shaun, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Fabulous to have you on. Shaun, a couple of observations that we made, and then I want to get you to weigh in at the GOP Advance Annual Convention at the Cavalier Hotel. Number one, volunteers or not, we were thrilled to see so many younger people there participating, whether they were volunteering for one of the 97 lieutenant governor candidates or whatever. There was an infusion of young people that was so exciting for us.
And
we were
staffers.
happy to see that.
And staffers as well.
Yeah,
22, 23-year-old guys handling media relations, communications, campaign events.
Right. Now, we saw that. We want to get you to comment on that. On the other hand, we didn't see a lot of diversity there, Shaun. The only Hispanic that we could find was Andy Villarraga, and he's our vice president of sales on the John Frederick Show. So we were trying to find, and we even said to him, go find another Hispanic here, Andy. And he talks Spanish, and he's from Colombia. He couldn't find one. It was an interesting diversity issue. And then, of course, the third thing is the big endorsement Friday night, Colonel Oliver North flying in, making a surprise appearance at the Pete Snyder for Lieutenant Governor campaign, making the endorsement there, which was a surprise, of Pete Snyder for Lieutenant Governor. That were some of the big issues. What say, Shaun?
Well, first off, I'll start with Ollie North because it was a real treat to be able to see him at Pete Snyder's suite. What a fantastic guy! What a great American! It was one of the first campaigns I worked for as a young man, getting involved in politics, and I think he inspired a lot of folks in my generation anyway, because it was a really dynamic campaign. That really got cut out. You got the chair cut out from underneath him. There's no question about it. But gosh, what a great guy Ollie North is, and very surprised to see how well Pete Snyder did in Virginia Beach. I think for those of you who were at the Advance, I think they testified very quickly. A lot of those young folks that were coming out supporting Pete Snyder with the Pete Snyder 13 shirts, and really made a quick impression that Pete Snyder is really in this to win. He's not in it for any other reason. Sort of segueing a little bit into why you saw so many young people there. I mean, obviously you've got, like you said, you've got at least 7 lieutenant governor candidates in there. You've got 2 AG candidates running. That's an opportunity for young folks to come out there and show their stuff and show that they're good supporters. And obviously, the College Republican Federation of Virginia, they do a great job of turning out the troops. But it's also a function of a different facet, and that's this ever so perceptible shift away from sort of the old school establishment conservative republicanism, a little bit more along the lines of the younger generation, which is a little bit more concerned about civil liberties. Obviously, there was a very strong Ron Paul contingent there.
Yes.
The Conservative Coalition, which is based in Virginia Beach, they do a great job of turning out troops. They're very young. So what you're seeing there is not necessarily a demographic shift from, say, the old and stodgy, cigar smoking in the back room sort of conservative powwow, but really more of a very young, dynamic sense where the torch is literally being passed, and you're starting to see that physically happen.
Shaun, talk about the difficulty in recruiting more youthful folks into the conservative movement, especially when you consider, at that age, late high school, early college years, young adults, you've got the influence beyond parents and peers of a much more liberal group of professors at the college and university levels that are kind of helping to shape the mush mind at that point, and how difficult that is to, let's call it, break the spell, to get that influx of youth into the conservative movement.
Well, you'd be surprised. For some folks, college is an experience where you go ahead and you adopt every crazy, wacky, idea from your feminist studies professor or what have you. For other folks, though, when you're there in college, it's almost a sort of a purification process. It's a testing by fire, where you actually do have all those values that your parents and your grandparents have instilled in you, and they get tested in a very real way. And a lot of folks cave. Some folks emerge, and those folks that do emerge typically emerge as leaders. And I think that that's what you're seeing there, especially at the Advance, where you have a lot of young folks that are actually sitting there, and they're the communications directors. They're engaging the press. They're the political directors.
Yeah.
They're even the finance directors to some degree. Generation Y, the millennials, for what as many people would like to smack them around and say that they're entitled, etc. They're also very entrepreneurial. I mean, they'll go out. They'll make their own jobs. They'll make their own name. They're not afraid to fail. They're not afraid to try. And so what you're seeing there is really amongst this new generation. I mean, the millennials are a pretty large generation, the largest since the baby boomers. But within them, there's this great entrepreneurial spirit that wants to go out there, start their own businesses, be independent, be self-sufficient. That's a great foundation for conservative principles. And if the current leadership of the Republican Party can find a way to embrace that, there's no reason in the world that we should be conceding the youth vote. And I think that the advance in certain candidates have certainly demonstrated that Republicans can win it if we just start embracing certain principles.
Well, Shaun, there was no question that just their presence there energized so many young people, was energizing for, I think, everything else. I think they added something, and hopefully, we can keep that up. Why don't we get right to the politics of it for a minute? 7 candidates running for lieutenant governor. Obviously, the big story there, Colonel Oliver North's surprise appearance endorsement of Virginia businessman and entrepreneur Pete Snyder. That was kind of the talk of Friday night and Saturday. 6 other candidates. In your mind, Shaun, at this convention, who were the winners and who maybe were not the winners?
Well, I think top of the list, your winner was Ken Cuccinelli. Obviously, Bill Bowling, you'd mark him down as one of the losers at this point, although he has started to recover a little bit from the shock and awe. Ken secured the gubernatorial nomination, no questions asked. Republican leadership is firmly behind him, no questions asked. There were a lot of Bill Bowling folks that did not show up to the advance, that did not see all the young people there that were rallying around the battle standard. I think it would have been helpful for those folks to see exactly what kind of Republican Party is coalescing around the new battle standard. So, I think right there at the top of the list, those are your winners and losers. In terms of the LG candidates, Pete Snyder's a hometown favorite. He came out there with his pig rig and I think he impressed a lot of folks. There's a lot of candidates in there that just sort of toss their name in just to see what happens. Pete's not one of those guys, so I think you got to give a lot of credit to Pete Snyder for putting on a good show at the advance. Other folks I would say that did fairly well at the advance that really made you sit up and take notice. Scott Lingenfelter obviously worked the crowd very well. You didn't see a whole lot of flash. You didn't see a whole lot of signs.
He'll actually be on with us in the next segment as part of the Lieutenant Governor Forum, Shaun.
Well, then there you go.
Yeah.
But he really impressed folks, walking around, shaking hands, talking the talk and walking the walk. Other candidates that were fairly impressive, Susan Stimson. You saw a lot of her stickers around. You saw a lot of folks shaking hands. You saw a lot of young folks around her. A very credible showing. Not such a credible showing from other candidates. Jean Marie Devilites Davis, she tried to make an impact, but just one example, I saw one of her volunteers outside of the suite where I was giving a presentation. Literally nobody took her stickers. I think her reputation with one gun a month and the red lights, passing the photo enforcement for red light cameras, I think that's all really hurt her on the civil liberties front. And for a young generation that is really obsessed with civil liberties at this point, that's just not the kind of candidate I think that they want to represent them. E.W. Jackson just tossed in. He really didn't have much of a presence there. But I think you're really starting to see now is there's a front pack and there's a back pack of candidates that are really trying to separate themselves from the rest, and everybody else sort of hanging back. It'll be real interesting to see which one falls into the dead pool, which one actually chooses to drop out rather than keep their name in, and which candidates are actually the ones that are going to start battling out for the nomination.
Shaun, who would you say is in the front pack right now?
If I had to start picking out names, I'd give you 3 candidates right now. I'd give you Scott Lingenfelter, I'd give you Steve Martin, and then I would give you Pete Snyder at this rate. I think, let it be said that Pete Snyder really impressed a lot of folks at the convention, and it sounds like I'm really talking about Pete quite a bit. I'm not.
You got to give your candid assessment one way or the other. One thing that impressed us when we talk about young people, and I'm going to let Steve comment on this, but he had an army of young people there with those shirts on and stuff, and there must have been 25 of them. It's like, where did they come from?
And you know, Shaun, it took easily close to 3 hours for everyone to get through that one suite where Oliver North was signing books on behalf of Pete Snyder. It took 2 rooms and half a hallway to accommodate them. I want to get to something before we run out of time because of your keen observation of state politics. In the governor's race, if Terry McAuliffe is the Democratic nominee, and it's assumed that he might be, what is the single state issue that Cuccinelli has to be very, very strong on in order to just knock McAuliffe out of this?
You know, if Terry McAuliffe emerges as the nominee, I think that, obviously everybody knows where Ken stands on social issues. Everybody knows that he's a fiscal warrior. Yeah. One of the things that we really talked about at the advance is that it's very difficult for Republicans to be able to point to one serious fiscal or one serious area of policy reform that we've enacted over the last 10 years. We've had control of the General Assembly. We've had the governor's mansion for a number of years. You have to really go all the way back to the abolishment of parole and parental consent and those are under the Allen administration to provide true victories. I mean, Jim Gilmore had the car tax, for instance, but Ken's got to be able to embrace something that really unites the ticket. Regulatory reform, repealing unfunded mandates to localities that eventually raise taxes on working families. Those are things that I think Ken can really embrace and show that he's a true reformist candidate. I'm not so sure that Terry McAuliffe will be your nominee on the Democratic end, though. I think Tom Perriello is serious. I think you're going to have a contested nomination at that end, and if Tom Perriello emerges as the victor, watch out. We're going to have a real serious conversation about 2 very different candidates and their visions for Virginia.
Shaun, very quickly, if McAuliffe is the nominee, is there any validity in using the carpetbagger label to take him down a notch strategically?
Well, I mean, obviously that's going to exist, but I don't think there's any advantage in actually playing that card. Look, I mean, everybody knows that Terry McAuliffe ain't from here.
That boy ain't from around these parts, I'm telling you.
But that's okay. There's a lot of folks that aren't from around here in Virginia, especially in Northern Virginia. So you go down in Southwest Virginia, you play the carpetbagger card. It doesn't quite sound the same way when you say it in Fairfax County.
Exactly.
Now, Shaun, why don't we talk about the Attorney General's race? 2 candidates, Mark Obenshine, Rob Bell, both in the State House. How do you see that shaping up right now?
Well, Rob Bell, again, had a very good presence at the advance. You saw all those red shirts. You had folks in the powdered wigs and the tricolor hats, ringing bells and things of this nature. But when you start actually going to the College Republicans Federation of Virginia suite, you saw, Mark Obenshine working the crowd. So, and a very pro-Obenshine crowd. So if the College Republican set is any indication, and you start going around and talking to the folks that were there, an overwhelmingly Ken Cuccinelli crowd, right now it's Mark Obenshane's to lose, but Rob Bell is doing everything possible through working hard and actually running a fairly positive campaign to make sure that it's not a coronation, it's a contested convention, and I think it'll be something to watch. This is not something that's locked up for Mark.
Yeah, I think that's going to be very close, and Rob Bell is one of those guys that you underestimate him, Shaun, at your own peril. As he kind of sneaks up on you. When you can get him, when he can get you one-on-one, he's very engaging. The other thing I'm going to say, we're going to have you comment on this when you get back next week, is gubernatorial presumptive nominee Ken Cuccinelli told me he is not utilizing a general consultant in this race, which I thought was fascinating. Shaun Kenney, thanks for joining us